Anxiety and depression. Everybody's journey is different, and it affects many of us. Today, we're going to hear a little bit about John's story. John is an amazing man. He tried so incredibly hard to make all the changes that he needed to make to find the necessary freedom from his struggle. In that, he found we hit a wall, and that wall came after about a year's worth of therapy. John and I, we worked and worked and worked, but we needed a little extra help. At the end of this video, you'll hear about Jamie, and Jamie is a medical prescriber. He's an amazing guy as well, and he helps people on that journey. That's a big deal. Do we want you to be on meds? No. Nobody wants to be on meds, and not everybody has to be on medication, and that's important to remember. However, many of us find ourselves in a place that we need a little extra help, and that extra help comes in the form of medication with therapy. Medication always should be paired with therapy. It's a necessity. It's even recommended by almost every single one of these medication when you read the fine print that none of us read. Okay? Like, seriously. But I want you to really think through as you're listening to John's story. How much of John's story can you align with, and how much can you see? I also want you to think about what it is that could potentially help you get past the things in your life that you're struggling. And when you think about those things, I want you to come back and share those with someone that you love.
My name is John Palomo. I've been coming to Open Door for almost 10 years now, off and on working through stuff. I have PTSD that, or post-traumatic stress, that manifests itself in an anxiety disorder. It comes through from some of my military service. I was involved in an incident with an aircraft where multiple things happened, but in a nutshell, somebody almost died on the aircraft. We were over in the Atlantic Ocean, and then the aircraft had an engine blow out, and we almost didn't make it back. Almost ended up in the Atlantic Ocean. I actually had to turn around and land in Ireland. So I had that incident happen, had a couple other incidents happen that really triggered some responses for me. Unfortunately, I didn't have the responses until later on in my life. It manifested themselves in an incident that happened in California. I got on a bus. I was actually trapped on the bus, and it induced a panic attack. And that panic attack really messed with my mental and physical systems. I describe it as breaking reality a little bit. All of a sudden you realize you're susceptible and can be hurt without anybody actually doing something to you. I tried to bury it for several years. I became hypersensitive to being in closed spaces, to standing up in front of people, to not really having a way out. It gradually got worse after that incident. Over a few years span, it de-escalated to the point where I couldn't even go to the back of Target. I started feeling trapped. I started getting a panic attack induced, sweaty palms. I was always looking for fresh air and a way out. There was a horrible way to live and still being in the military and trying to function and not really understanding what is going on. I prayed about it. I really spoke with my wife quite often. She saw how much I had fallen apart, and we could not figure out why. I continued to go to church. In fact, going to church, which was one of the most comfortable places in my life, I actually got to the point where I could no longer sit up front. I had such anxiety that I would sit in the very back, closest to a door, so that I could leave as quickly as I got in. That stress, it continues to a point to where you really, life is no longer fun. You're not able to enjoy. You're not able to go. I wasn't traveling. I really was not doing anything. My first son was born. I had a hard time even being up in the hospital. Very difficult. We finally came to a point, it came to a breaking point where I said, I can't live like this anymore. This isn't anything that I can do. I didn't have any other options. I had no answers. So we began meeting with Josh, began working on trying to identify what the problem was. And it took us even 4 or 5 months of talking through, trying to explain when these feelings came up and what was really the root cause and what was really triggering the attacks to happen. We went into a lot of the science behind anxiety disorder and panic attack, what causes that stuff, and that's where we were able to figure out that the root cause actually was the incident that had happened on the plane almost 10 years earlier. One of the biggest things that I had going into, because I was in the military and because of the way that the military treats you when you're dealing with mental health concerns, it was very taboo at the time. It was something that I thought I was going to lose my career over. We worked through that, staying on the front edge of military policies. And my initial request that there was to not use any medicine to help. I was absolutely afraid that if I started taking any medicine, that I would be disqualified. So everything had to be done just through desensitization, our standard counseling, talking through. I had homework that I would have to do. My wife and I worked together, trying to help bridge the gap a little bit and help my body and my mind to start recognizing that I was actually safe. I was okay. You're reacclimating yourself to being able to go and do the things that you used to be able to do. That went on for a couple of years. I had my second son born. We went up to the hospital, and being locked in the hospital and a little bit of the stress between my wife not sleeping well and then me trying to help, I ended up having another panic attack in the hospital. Made a huge issue for me. Kind of was a couple steps back, and so instantly called Josh. We worked it together to where I could get through to get my son home, and then I realized that the processes that we'd been working was no longer enough to sustain, and so we were able to sit down and put together a plan that included some medicine to help out. We went through and looked at everything that could be taken, that I could remain capable of working, that I could remain going forward, but also help to offset the chemical imbalance that's created from a post-traumatic event. Initially, it took about 30 days, and within that 30 days, I started to notice some changes, between the counseling and continue to work on our road ahead. The medicine did begin to help, and we were finally kind of able to level out. I began to fly again, which was a huge weight off my shoulders to be able to travel, to be able to go to some schools, to be able to go and visit my family or take my family on vacation. That was a huge weight off my shoulders. And so we've just continued to build on how everything works together. When you're recovering from an event like this, you have to go to the level that you're comfortable with. For me, initially, it was no medicine. And then I hit a point to where it was easy to understand the science behind it that required medicine, and then maintaining a low dosage to that level of comfortability to where I can operate and understand what's happening and what's going on. Now I'm in a position where I get to help others. I've come along a very long way, that I can see when other people are struggling with anxiety disorders or post-traumatic stress, whether on all levels, whether it's from military or whether it's from events in your past. I don't think anybody really wants to take medicine, but I know enough now to understand what it can do, how it can help you, and the people to get you to that you can trust, that's going to get you taken care of. And realistically, in this office with Josh Holloway and his staff, that's a huge benefit to have for our community, for our state, to be able to get people the proper help that they need, and to be able to get them on the road to recovery.
Today I'd like to talk about medications in mood disorders. So a lot of people feel as though they can do without medications when they have anxiety or depression, and that's perfectly fine. But medications is often helpful in mood disorders. We know that through different studies and scans that there does tend to be a serotonin component in mood disorders. So serotonin is an important part of regulating mood. A lot of times, whenever we're depressed or anxious, there's a dysregulation in serotonin. And so medications that increase serotonin can be helpful in regulating mood disorders for people. Whenever we think about a generalized anxiety disorder, a lot of times the psychotherapy that we do in the office is only enhanced by medications that people take. So whenever we look at those things, medication is a wonderful additive to people with generalized anxiety disorder. Usually medications might take 3 to 6 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, before people notice a difference. A lot of times people drop away whenever medications are taken just for the first few weeks because they don't feel a difference in that. But if they stick with the medications, they can see benefits over a long period of time. Another problem with medications is that people start to feel better, and so they decide to stop the medications, thinking that they don't need the medications any longer. And then within a few weeks, they tend to relapse. And so, although it's a good idea to consider tapering off of medications maybe after a year or so to see where you're at, that should be done in conjunction with your psychotherapist or your physician or some kind of therapy to make sure that that's done correctly and properly. So I would like to say that medications can be a wonderful adjunct to therapy. Although not necessarily in all cases, medicines can be tried on a short-term basis, like 6 months to a year, to see if there's some benefit from them. And then a trial off of the medicines is always helpful as well. A lot of times medications come with side effects. And so people will maybe feel a certain amount of side effects that's really intolerable. One of the things I get is that, it just made me feel kind of numb, like they didn't have any ups or downs. And although that might be helpful for people that are depressed and it might keep them from being depressed or really anxious, they don't really feel good on that medicine, so they stop taking it. And I would say that different medicines come with different side effects. And so you can go back to your doctor and say, hey, this is how this is making me feel. Can we adjust that medicine and see if another medication would be more helpful to regulate your symptoms? Again, doctors, a lot of times they look at the whole person. So when we look at the whole person and we see all the different things that are going on in people's lives, then we can adjust the medications to fit that person the best we can. But then feedback is a good way to understand what the next step is, change in treatment or or adjustment in the medicine dose. Sometimes people think that having to go on medications means there's somehow a failure, or they can't do it on their own. And a lot of times some of this thinking is pervasive in society, and in Montana particularly, where Montana was forged on people coming out west and staking a claim and making it on their own, especially when you talk to your grandparents or some of those folks. And so a lot of times they make you feel like a failure if you're not able to get through it on your own. And I would say that that's just not biologically true. So although it's nice to think about those things, everybody's different, and we have a different biologic makeup. And a lot of times, again, it goes back to this serotonin regulation. People are just made differently, and some people need to regulate serotonin a little bit better, and the medication can help them do that in the short term, maybe even long term. But don't think of it as a failure on your part. That's just not true.